simply washing dirt.
And also, if you're falling down the side of a hill that you've tried to climb up, you can just stick it in there and pull yourself back up, which I have done on multiple occasions.
Hey everybody, welcome to the studio. My name is Erin and I'm joined by some really amazing celebrity guests, including our friend here at the studio, Kathy.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited because I have two very good friends of mine who I spent the summer with. We have Emily and Helen. And Emily and Helen, where are you?
We are currently in Virginia. We are at Virginia Tech, a university there.
I know, right?
At another university facility too,
All
huh?
the way on the other side of the country. And can you tell our friends what we did this summer?
Oh, what didn't we do this summer? We spent the summer in Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona, digging up fossils from the Triassic period.
Whoa, and Kathy, you were there too.
Yes, I did dig up fossils. Yes, we found fossils. It was awesome.
So we'll go a little bit into what paleontology is in the presentation, but basically we are scientists who study ancient life.
Oh, so more than just dinosaurs and everything like that.
More than just dinosaurs, yeah.
Yeah, a small fraction of history is dinosaurs. So we are so excited to tell you about our time in Petrified Forest National Park, among other places that we've done field work, and the treasures of the Triassic. The Triassic period being a time just before the more famous Jurassic period, like you might have heard of from Jurassic Park. So this is the time period just before that. Specifically, we were looking at areas around 210 to 220 million years ago, when this area that you see in this image is kind of like a dry desert, but back then it was an area which was lush with greenery and rivers and trees and amazing animals that are nothing like what we see today.
Yeah, this is the time period when like the first dinosaurs are just starting to proliferate across the world. So we get some very early dinosaurs, but a lot of other cool things as well.
Yeah, but we'd like to introduce ourselves a little bit more.
Hi, so as has been said, I am Emily. I'm a third year PhD student, so I'm studying to get a doctorate in paleontology. I have pretty much always been interested in dinosaurs and animals. You can see a little tiny me in the early 2000s there with my brother cropped out of the picture in my bedroom. That's just how the picture was. I did not do that. But now I do things like I study dinosaurs and other archosaurs, which we'll talk about in a bit. So here is me with the jaw of the first ever T-Rex that was ever found, and also me in the field looking for fossils.
Wow, and okay, wait, so is that a real T-Rex jaw?
Yeah.
Wow, where is that?
That is in the London Natural History Museum. It's not the holotype of T-Rex. It's actually, so that's the sort of first described specimen that all others are compared to. That is in the Carnegie Museum here in America.
Should have put my picture with that.
But this one was the first one found, but it was given a different name. It was called Dinomasaurus. But they eventually realized when they'd cleaned it up more that it was the same as this other animal that had been named one page earlier in a paper called T-Rex.
Wow. So basically, just to be clear, when they found this, they didn't know what it was. They called it something totally different. And then later on figured out, oh, this is the same thing. This is a T-Rex.
Yeah.
They had found it before the other one.
Yes. But the name T-Rex was named before Dinomasaurus, even though they found this one first. So T-Rex is the one we have today.
Super cool. And I absolutely love the point of view of us being a fossil. Oh, we're getting like uncovered.
I like your hat too.
Yeah, I took that on the first day of the field this year and sent it to a friend, and he was a bit upset and was confused.
Love it. I love it.
And I'm Helen. I'm a second year PhD student, and I have always loved animals. I've always known that I wanted to have a career in understanding animals and understanding ecosystems. Here I am at about 6 or 7 with a big frog. But now I'm studying paleoecology. A big part of what got me into this was reading books about how humans evolved from fishy ancestors, and that type of thing got me really excited about wow, there were a lot of different stages that the world had to go through to get to the ecosystems that we see today. So now I'm interested in studying how those operated.
So basically, you're saying that way back when we're talking about the Triassic and all the dinosaurs, the world did not look like it looks right now.
No,
The
it
environment is different. No.
all the continents were in different places. We had different seas, and the Earth as a whole was on average quite a bit hotter than it is today.
Helen, did we also have fishy ancestors or anything like that too?
Oh, we did have fishy ancestors. Nearly everything on land other than the bugs had a fishy ancestor at one point.
So cool.
Very cool.
Hundreds and millions of years ago,
yes.
but we did have them.
Very cool. And then, so I know that Emily is a paleontologist, but you are a paleocologist?
Well, we all take on sort of different terms that we most identify with. But as someone who's studying primarily community structure and composition and functional roles of animals, I identify most with the term paleoecologist.
Got it.
So you kind of understand how a lot of animals work together and were in communities together at the same time millions of years ago.
Yeah.
Got it.
Lots of subfields within paleontology, paleobiologist.
Yeah, we have a paleoichthyologist who studies fish, and so if we go into sort of just what is paleontology now, you had a
well, basically we had all of these animals that were alive millions of years ago, and even more recently animals that were alive, like big modern, like things that look like what we know today, like mammals, but these animals lived and then had to die, unfortunately. But luckily for us, a lot of them were buried and preserved in ecosystems and in ways that allowed their bones to be preserved really well for us to eventually dig up. So a lot of what paleontology is identifying areas where these fossils could potentially be found. So looking for the right time period, the right type of sediment, and then going to these areas with our tools, looking around for them, digging them up, and then taking them home so that eventually we can do research on them and prepare them to be used in museums, shown to the public, as well as, studied rigorously at institutions like the one that we're at.
And we'll sort of break down a lot of these different steps and how we excavate and how we dig things up and things like that. But are there any questions before we get into that?
So you mentioned that one of the things that you have to do then is to figure out where, it's not that there's dinosaurs, or maybe there are dinosaurs everywhere, or fossils everywhere.
It's like really you need a specific type of environment to preserve a fossil. So you can't have like a really fast flowing river.
Mountains are bad. They get eroded really quickly. Yeah,
the best places to preserve a fossil are areas with slow moving water, small sediment that's not going to rip up the fossil. So like a marsh or a bog is a very good place to get preserved.
Floodplains that have a lot of water over a wide area are also a good one too.
Yeah.
When you guys talk about sediment, is that dirt? Is that different kinds of dirt?
Basically, yeah. Like we have sediment kind of rocks and things like sandstones and things like that. But yeah, it's basically dirt.
So the idea though is, even though for millions of years you've had all these animals living on the planet and they all die and many of them have bones, they don't all become fossils.
No, they don't all become fossils.
In fact, a tiny percent become fossils.
Yeah.
Got it. So you guys are just trying to figure out where those fossils are, and then you can go and dig them up.
Yeah. So there's so many animals we've never even seen or heard of before. And your job is discovering them and talking about them and learning more.
Oh yeah. And the cool thing at the moment, we are sort of in a golden age of paleontology. At the moment, there's roughly one dinosaur described every week, which is just crazy.
Really? So there's hundreds of animals out there that have existed that we don't even know about.
Oh yeah, for
millions.
Sure, yeah.
Wow, that is kind of mind-blowing. I had no idea. And a lot of these animals that you guys are talking about do not exist anymore.
No. hardly anything
I mean,
from
sharks,
the Triassic that we're
but-
looking at.
Yeah.
And basically, the way that we can find out certain animals is we go to their environments where they used to be, and we can find their fossils. But we're probably not going to know all of the animals that used to be there because they're not all preserved in this very specific kind of dirt, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Thank
So how long does it take for something to become a fossil as opposed to just like a pile of bones?
It kind of depends. There is this figure of about 10,000 years.
Wow.
But like the ones we're looking at are millions and millions of years old, so it can be longer.
They had plenty of time.
Yeah, sometimes things get mineralized really fast. Like there are really weird, like there's sort of like cave deposits of minerals that can mineralize something very, very quickly. But the general one we usually give is 10,000 years.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes if we're really, really lucky, things will get mummified and then we can have soft tissue preserved, which is amazing and tells us a lot more because you can get a great idea of kind of the general body plan of an animal from its bones, but it's hard to understand more about what's on the exterior without having soft tissue.
Right. And just for some of our viewers out there who may not know, what exactly is a fossil?
So a fossil is, in the most basic terms, the remains or traces of ancient life. So there are various different ways something can become fossilized. So permineralization, where the organic tissues are replaced with minerals through sort of groundwater action, is one of the main ones. But we also get things like mummies, which are dried out first before becoming sort of more mineralized. We get like carbon imprints. That's usually quite a common way that plants are preserved. There's lots of different types of fossil, and also we get ones that aren't what we call body fossils, so they're not the actual organism, they're just the trace of the organism. So we get things like footprints and coprolites, which are fossil poo.
Fossil. Oh, we actually found a ton of fossil poo this summer.
That's hilarious.
Everywhere. There's a lot of fossil poo.
Here we've got a really, really beautiful piece of petrified wood, which is part of the main attraction of Petrified Forest National Park. It's essentially a giant, just miles and miles of petrified trees, and they still look very much like regular wood, but each cell has essentially been replaced with minerals, and so all of the original structure of the wood is still preserved, but it's now like as hard as a rock.
Yeah, you can sort of.
Oh wow. It really does look like wood though. Like it looks just like wood, but it's not wood.
Yeah.
So you
It's a lot heavier.
that cells can be replaced in fossils and whatnot. We can get an idea of like exteriors. So basically, it's really hard to know what dinosaurs looked like because a lot of them, their soft tissue doesn't exist anymore. So they could have been like purple or sparkly or whatever, and we wouldn't know.
Yeah,
Pretty much. And
yeah.
we kind of think that some of them were sparkly or at least iridescent.
Yeah. We do rarely get fossil soft tissue, and one of the cool things that's been a sort of recent development in paleontology is the field of paleocolor, which is we have been able to find fossilized little organelles in cells called melanosomes. And these contain the pigment eumelanin or phenylalanine. And these two different colors of melanin, they give us either sort of like black pigments, gray pigments, or they give us like red and rusty browns and oranges. And so we've actually found these in fossils, so we can tell the color of some dinosaurs and other animals. So the first one they did this was called Sinosauropteryx, and it was found to have a ginger and white stripy tail. That was really cool.
Wow, that is cool.
Well, now we'll get into a bit of what field work actually was like before we talk about these cool organisms. As you can see, we camp during our field work. So here we are in Petrified Forest National Park under the beautiful starry sky. There's not a lot of lights to pollute it, so we can see all of the stars, but camping for several weeks in the desert is hard work, but it's also a lot of fun.
Yes, I remember that well. I remember the dirt well.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah. Gets all in your tent and in your sleeping bag.
Nothing you can do about it.
But here's just a few pictures from our field work. Here's me and Emily in a sort of all-terrain vehicle, because a lot of the sites that we like to visit are they're not off of main roads. You have to either hike out to them, or if you're lucky, take one of these cool cars to get there.
We've also got a few pics of our crew working. So we've got a lot of us here posing for the camera. This is one of our sites in Texas, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And then on the bottom here, we've got a photo of us setting up our kitchen setup. All of our cooking is also done outdoors. So we have to use a portable gas-powered stove. We wash our dishes in tubs, and we eat in a tent to keep the bugs away from our food.
And this final picture is us in the field actually excavating. So we've got Michelle, Davide, and Erica here working on a jacket, which we will be explaining all about later. And this is actually when some of you guys were here as well.
Yeah, I recognize that picture very well.
Yeah. Oh. And here you are in the field doing a bit of greenwashing.
It is me. Yes, I did get my hands dirty this summer. Yes.
What are you guys doing here in this picture specifically?
So in this one, you guys can
No,
the better. We're basically washing dirt. We had like these big giant bags of dirt that we brought back, and we are basically washing it to try to get the microfossils out. Oh, yes. And that is basically the leftovers, I guess, of what we had.
Yeah, you can take a big chunk of rock, and because of the type of sediment or like dirt that it's in, it's basically made of mud. And so when you take that big chunk of rock and you put it in water, it just dissolves. And because the fossils are not made of that, they're not made of mud, they won't dissolve. And we can use a very fine hold sieve to try and separate them from the mud, and then basically condense the amount of rock that we actually have to carry all the way back to Virginia.
Oh, like the gold rush. It's when they did this.
It was really amazing. Yeah, I mean, it was amazing to me because I feel like we had these giant 50-pound, like huge stacks of rock, and we would wash it in these, and the leftovers you could put into Ziploc bags. So you're like getting rid of so much weight by doing that.
So you guys had to carry dirt down a mountain, down the hike you guys are in, put it into your all-terrain vehicle, and drag it back to Virginia where the facility is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at the field, we also get to see a lot of cool not dead stuff. So there's lots and lots of critters because we're outside basically for a whole month. We do see a lot of wildlife, which is really cool. So we get like lizards. We had a frog in camp as well. It was really tiny and cute by the water. Things like prairie dogs are common to see. We get turtles and things. At the Grand Canyon, we saw bighorn sheep. And if we're very, very lucky, then we get to see things like rattlesnakes.
Well, one thing that I did want to mention, from the pictures you could kind of see it, but I mean, you guys are like in places that are really hot and dry and dusty. It's not like very cushy living.
It's not glamping.
It is not glamping at all. Yeah, it's not glamorous, but it was I have to say it was so much fun.
It's very grounding, and it helps you appreciate how hard it is for us to get these fossils out. So when you're actually working on them in the lab, you have a greater appreciation for where they come from, and also for the actual environment that we live in today. That desert area is unlikely to be fossilized very well, but it's really life-changing to experience field work in the desert.
And that first night in a bed on the way back is just, oh.
The weekly shower.
Oh, the weekly shower.
The weekly shower when you're washing dirt, you'll get blood shower.
It is not glamorous, but I do think that that's kind of something that people don't quite understand, like how much effort and work it is when they go to a museum and they see these like giant dinosaur, the skeletons of these entire dinosaurs. it's not like they have a million of those lying around. Like, it's not easy to get that, and they're delicate. They're really easy to break. It's hard to find them. It takes a lot of time and effort and sweat and blood and sometimes tears.
That's actually a great intro into our our next slide of what do fossils actually look like in the field, because they're a lot harder to find than just seeing a beautiful skeleton just sticking out of the rock. So often you get just like a tiny piece peeking out, and because you don't want to risk breaking it, a lot of times we actually try to leave it in the rock, like you see in this first picture, where we built kind of a pedestal around a Metoposaur interclavicle, which we'll talk a bit more about that later. But they can be very difficult to see, and that's a big fossil. And then, so we can also have smaller fossils like this one, which is maybe the size of a golf ball, and then this one, which is the size of, I don't know, toothpick.
Yeah.
Very, very small. And then that's part of why we take home these big chunks of rock, because there are lots of fossils that are too small for us to see in the rock. So to make sure that we're getting a holistic view of the ecosystem, we need to take home rocks that contain those tiny, tiny fossils and then sort through them with a microscope to make sure that we get everything.
And to do that, we have a field kit, a toolbox, if you will, of different tools that we use. So one of our favorite tools is, of course, the hammer. This is what we call a rock hammer, so it's specially designed for hitting rocks. You can see it's got this like nice flat edge, which is great for like splitting up big blocks or heavy nodules. It's got this pick end, or sometimes they have a chisel end, which is better for fine work. And also, if you're falling down the side of a hill that you've tried to climb up, you can just stick it in there and pull yourself back up, which I have done on multiple occasions.
Next, another very, very important tool is glue, because when we find something in the field, we don't want it to fall apart at some point on the journey back to Virginia. So we take this special glue and we will just cover everything, just cover every surface of the bone, the rock around it, to keep it all together before we package it up so that it's less likely to break apart.
Yeah, the good thing about this glue is it's totally reversible as well. So when we get it back to the lab, obviously you don't really want to be working with just a huge gluey mess of rock and bone, but we can put acetone on it, which is the sort of thing that you remove your nail polish with if you have your nails done, and this dissolves the glue and it can be worked on a lot easier.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think that I never realized is that fossils are super, super delicate. They're not hard. You think of fossils as being stone or rock, but they're super delicate. And so, yeah.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you guys, it sounds like in the past, maybe not with y'all, but fossils were broken very easily. Yeah. Is that true?
Fossil.
Yeah, we've all broken fossils.
I broke many a fossil during my time out there. Didn't want to tell anyone about it, but yeah.
You say it was broken when I found it, and then you glue
exactly.
Yeah.
Because fossils are so delicate, one of the things that we use a lot are paintbrushes of various different sizes. And this can just help us brush off dirt more delicately, expose something so we can see where it leads, what's going on, what the anatomy is. Very helpful and more delicate than going in there with like a big old hammer.
Yeah. But we do also go in with hard tools like a screwdriver if you need to break out a section of rock that has a fossil preserved in it and you've already dug around it to make sure you found the whole thing, or if you need to split a rock open to see if there's any fossils inside to decide the best pieces to take home in our sacks.
Just gives you a lot more control that way. And because we're looking at really, really tiny fossils, something that's very useful for us is a hand lens, which is basically like a little tiny magnifying glass. So you can hold your fossil up to your eye, take a look at with your hand lens, and it's a lot clearer to see what it is.
Especially if it's something cool and new that no one has found before, then you can draw a star in it before you put it in the bag.
My favorite thing that we use, the toilet. We go through a lot of toilet paper, and not just for going to the loo in the field. We use this to help pack fossils. So if we have tiny little fossils and really delicate, we'll wrap them in a layer of toilet roll. We might also wrap them in aluminum foil as well. But we'll also use these in jackets, which we're going to be talking a bit about in a minute, as a separator layer between the bone, dirt, and the plaster that we put on top.
Mm-hmm. And then some would say the most important tool in the field is a field notebook, a place to put down all of your notes about what site you were going to on what day, who was there, what you found, any extra observations that you made, because while you're out there, you're like, well, I'm absolutely going to remember where each fossil came from. And then you get back and you're like, where did these fossils come from? This bag isn't labeled. So it's very important to take good field notes, to record everything so that you have a good documentation for every fossil, and that way it can be better used in research.
Yeah, one of the things that I really loved about being out there is kind of how clever paleontologists are about the tools they use. Like, you know, you would never expect, oh, a screwdriver and a roll of toilet paper. Like, those are like really important tools out there, and they really were. We used a lot. I mean, there was this giant bag in the van of just toilet paper. It was like huge, probably like 30 rolls in there.
Have
It
its
was
own.
crazy.
Yeah.
I still have this like thought in my brain of you hanging off the side of the mountain with your hammer. I'll be stuck there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, did you fall on the toilet paper? Did it cushion your fall? Oh my gosh.
Well, one of the times I fell down the hill, I fell on a bed of fossil shells and cut my leg up terribly.
Oh no.
It's good to bring like a pad as well, because in the areas that are super rich in fossils, which is where we want to be, they're also very sharp. So when you're getting down to try and look and clean and find the ones that you want, your legs are getting all cut up by the ground. Yeah.
Whoa, then question, that kind of looks like a pill bottle almost.
That is a pill bottle. They're small fossils are very similar to pills in size and shape. So a great way to store them to keep them safe on the way home is to put them in a pill bottle. And in this one here, all of the fossils that we found came from what we think is a single animal. So we wanted to keep them all together. So we packaged them up in a little pill bottle, labeled it, and then took it home.
One of the big deteriorators. It's much more like moisture can be a very big thing. I mean, even temperature to an extent is probably more than light is an issue.
And then in the center here, you can see a bunch of our big bags of essentially chunks of rock that we've taken from the field. So that's what we saw Kathy washing earlier in that big tub, is we're trying to turn all of those big bags into smaller bags so they're easier to take home. And that's what's also going on in this picture here on the side with some of our undergrad assistants and a postdoc in our lab. And then with slightly bigger fossils, they're not really fitting in bags or pill vials. So we have a much more involved way of getting these fossils home. So when you see a good fossil in the field, such as in the center of this clump here, you might think, oh, that looks like a bunch of rocks. But it's actually, I believe, some chunks of phytosaur.
I think so, yeah.
So you have to identify that first piece of fossil and then start cleaning very carefully around it to find the extent of how far this one animal goes within the sediment, because you don't know if you just have one leg bone or if you've got an entire preserved articulated skeleton, which would be amazing. So when we have fossils that are found in association with one another, we can kind of infer that they came from the same organism. So it's really important for us to keep those all together in the orientation that they were found. So you'll find that first fossil, start to clean out away from it. And once you stop finding fossils, then you'll start to dig a big trench around it to make essentially a big, make a big mound of your fossil. And then you're going to cover that entire thing in glue to make sure that nothing's going to move around, and include any things that were found close to it in a plastic bag like we see there. And then you start to get to building a cast around it. So you have your layer of glue, and then you're going to do a layer of toilet paper, one of the most important parts.
Always.
So you'll get a bunch of wet toilet paper and cover the entire pedestal up with that. That's going to protect it from the next layer, which is plaster. So essentially, if you've ever done paper mache, it's very similar to doing paper mache. We do several layers of both plaster and burlap for stability, which will over a time of 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes
depending
more.
Depending on the size of jacket.
To make a hard shell around it that's going to hold everything in place. That's what you see in the middle there. And then once that's all set up and dried, you can take a long screwdriver or two and slide them under that kind of like mushroom cap of a jacket, and then pop it out of the ground, and then you just have to take it home. Sometimes you'll put a protective cover on the other side if there's more fossils. Sometimes you didn't realize that the fossil kept going down, and then you'll have to make a second jacket below it. That's not good when that happens. But then you have to take that big jacket home with you. But sometimes they're very, very big.
Yeah. So this is a jacket, not from this summer, but the summer before. This is what we call the backhoe phyto, because we had a backhoe come in and just like rough up all the rocks. And this is one of the things that we found from that. It enabled us to find much bigger things, which was very good. But here you can see sort of the size of the jacket. We've got our Professor Sterling here with his head just fully under it, mushrooming it out. So it takes a lot of work to get a jacket this size ready to be flipped. And it took a lot of us to flip it as well. It was a very, very precise operation. But when we flipped it onto this net, which later on allowed us to carry it slightly more easily to the back of the Suburban and put it in there. This one is a lot bigger, so we did need to put a protective cap on the other side, which is what we're doing here with our lovely plastery hands there. All doing this, and I mean you can see it is all hands on deck, literally. But yeah, when we put it in the car, there are no pictures of that because everyone was involved and there just wasn't anyone left to take photos. So it was just everyone holding onto this net and trying to drag it. There were people inside the car pulling it back inside, people watching out, people trying to make sure that the bumper of the car didn't come off. It did. It was okay. We put it back on. It was fine. But eventually we got it back and it's in the lab now. So we've actually got a picture of that as well. And if there are any questions about like excavating things.
Wow. So what was that again?
This is the backhoe phyto. I call it phyto butt because it's sort of the like pelvis region of a phytosaur, which we have pictures coming up, but it's basically like a big crocodile-like animal that lived in the Triassic. The cool thing about this is that it is pretty articulated, so it's in the position that it was in life. And this is really important to keep in one piece, especially as we've got stomach osteoderms on this, which are really, really rare in place. So it can tell us a lot about this phytosaur and what it looked like when it was alive.
Wow.
And keeping it in one position can also talk about like how it walked and how it, just got around, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like if we had the whole pelvis in there, that would tell us a lot about how its femur, its leg bone, upper leg bone, sort of connected with the hip, and what its range of movement was in that. We can do like different calculations and things on that. We can see if it was more like a sprawling animal like crocodiles are today, or if it was more upright like a dinosaur. It can tell us like a lot about how it moved, this sort of section of the phytosaur.
And because ancient animals often don't look a lot like what we know from today, if we find their fossils in non-articulated forms, there's room for error when we make our actual reconstructions of what it might have looked like. So, for instance, if you've heard of the dinosaur iguanodon, it has a big spike on its thumbs, which when they first found it, they said, that goes on the nose, or that goes on the head, like a unicorn. So it's really great to find articulated fossils because it helps us know with more certainty that the reconstructions that we're making are true to what they might have been.
And how long did it take you guys to get this specimen out?
It took us a good few weeks to get it like dug out, and then this is like, I think like sort of half of the sediment has been cleaned off this, and that has taken one of our volunteers, Gino, the last couple of like a year and a half to do, basically. So, or like a couple of years, last year. So and it's still going. So it takes a lot of time to prepare these.
And this, when you're saying it's a very well preserved specimen, but it's not the entire creature. It's only that back half or the back hip part, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So that's a huge animal.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yes.